them all what I'm made up. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
You ever get that feeling that things in Washington can just shift really fast? We're diving straight into some pretty significant changes happening right now within the White House National Security Team. News just broke that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and his deputy, Alex Wong, are expected to leave.
That's right. We're mainly looking at a new CBS News report here, and it definitely points to a notable shakeup over in the West Wing. So our goal today is to get past the headlines, really dig into the details of these departures and maybe what they signal.
Okay, so the big news. Waltz and Wong are apparently on their way out. What specifics do we have?
Well, the CBS report pins the expected departure date as this Thursday, May 1st, 2025.
This Thursday? Wow, okay.
Yeah. And interestingly, the White House hasn't put out an official comment just yet.
Often the case, I suppose. There's usually a bit of quiet while these things get finalized behind the scenes.
Exactly. And it seems journalist Mark Halperin might have been the first to report this. But, it's always crucial to remember nothing's truly final until the president actually announces it.
Good point. Always that caveat. The report does mention Chief of Staff Susie Wiles is having conversations with NSC staff right now.
That certainly suggests, a lot of internal activity managing these transitions.
Right. Now, this development, it doesn't exactly come out of the blue, does it? Waltz faced some pretty intense scrutiny recently. Thinking back to that Signal chat incident in March.
Ah, yes, the Signal chat. It's kind of remarkable, isn't it, how a seemingly small mistake, a tech mistake almost, could have such potential fallout at this level.
So remind us, what happened there?
Okay, so the report laid it out. Walz accidentally included Jeffrey Goldberg, who's, with The Atlantic,
right,
in a Signal chat. And this wasn't just casual conversation. They were discussing plans for a potential military strike against Houthi targets in Yemen.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're talking sensitive stuff, timelines, maybe even specific weapons packages mentioned in the reporting later.
And that inclusion led to Goldberg publishing a story.
It did. Initially, the report was, let's say, a bit more general. But then, after denials came from high-up Defense Secretary Hegseth, DNI Gabbard, CIA Director Ratcliffe denying classified info was shared.
Okay.
Well, then the more specific details, the operational bits like timing and weapons, they got published.
That sounds like quite an escalation.
Yeah.
Leaking operational details after official denials.
It definitely raised eyebrows, yeah. Serious concerns about how sensitive national security info was being handled. And the CBS report says Waltz did admit privately, behind closed doors, that Goldberg's reporting was, in fact, accurate.
Which must have kicked off some serious talks inside the White House about whether he should resign.
Apparently so. The report mentions internal debate on that, but in the end, he didn't offer his resignation, and critically, the president didn't ask him to step down then.
Right. I remember President Trump actually came out publicly and supported Waltz, called him a good man, said he'd learned a lesson.
Exactly. Which sort of gave the impression, at least publicly, that the matter was closed, for the time being anyway.
So, why now? If he weathered that storm back in March, why the departure now in May?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the report offers some insight from a source familiar with the NSC.
Okay.
This source suggests the president basically feels enough time has gone by since the Signal incident.
Okay. So the thinking is?
The thinking seems to be that now these departures, Waltz's and Wong's, can be framed more as a standard reorganization, a shakeup, not a direct consequence of that specific security lapse back in March.
So avoiding the perception of, bowing to outside pressure or criticism about the Signal incident.
That seems to be the calculation, yes. Managing the narrative, making it look like a planned move rather than a forced one.
Makes sense from a political standpoint, I suppose. Okay, let's shift focus slightly to Alex Wong, the Deputy National Security Advisor, also heading out. What's his background?
Wong's got history in the Trump administration, the first one. His focus was mainly on North Korea and broader East Asian and Pacific affairs over at the State Department.
Specific roles.
Yeah, he was Deputy Special Representative for North Korea, also a Deputy Assistant Secretary for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. So these are roles that involve a lot of diplomacy, policy work in a really critical part of the world.
And President Trump himself gave him some credit, didn't he? Something about the North Korea summit.
He did. Publicly stated Wong helped negotiate his summit with Kim Jong-un, so definitely experience with high-stakes international dealings.
Interesting. And when CBS News reached out to Wong about leaving?
He offered a no comment.
Often says more than saying something, sometimes.
It can, yeah. Often suggests things are still in flux or there's sensitivity around the departure. So naturally, with Waltz and Wong leaving, the big question becomes, who's next? Who might fill these very significant roles?
Speculation's already started, of course. The CBS report suggests one name is likely out of the running for the top job, Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy to the Middle East.
Right. Unlikely for National Security Advisor, according to their sources.
But other names are being floated, names very familiar to anyone who follows this administration closely.
Yes, and what's interesting about the names mentioned, Stephen Miller, Seb Gorka, is how closely aligned they are with President Trump's, let's say, core mission and worldview.
Miller being the White House Deputy Chief of Staff currently.
Correct. And Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President, Senior Director for Counterterrorism, both are known for being staunch loyalists, very firm on key administration priorities.
So their potential candidacy might signal maybe a shift towards an even more ideologically aligned NSC.
That's certainly a possibility observers are considering, yeah. Loyalty and alignment seem paramount.
And we should also note Rick Grinnell, former acting DNI and special envoy, he publicly stated he doesn't want the National Security Advisor job.
Right, so he's taken himself out of the running, at least publicly.
Now, putting these two departures, Waltz and Wong, into a slightly wider context,
Yeah.
they aren't happening in isolation, are they? There are other NSC changes recently.
That's a really important connection to make. The CBS report reminds us that back in early April, at least 6 NSC staffers were let go, fired.
And the reported reason for those firings is, well, it's quite something. It involved Laura Loomer, the right-wing personality.
Yes. Reports suggested Loomer presented President Trump with what was described as opposition research on these NSC staffers.
Opposition research on his own NSC staff. What was the issue?
The main criticism, reportedly, was that these staffers were considered neoconservatives. You know, that term often implies support for a more interventionist U.S. foreign policy.
They're not loyal enough.
Or that, yes, or just generally deemed insufficiently loyal to the president and his agenda.
Wow. So firings based on perceived ideology or lack of personal loyalty presented by an outside commentator.
It certainly raises big questions, doesn't it, about the criteria being used for staffing these critical national security positions. Is it primarily about deep policy expertise and traditional experience, or is it shifting more towards ideological purity and demonstrated personal loyalty as the key factor?
Okay, so let's try to pull these threads together. We have the expected departures, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Deputy Alex Wong. This comes months after that pretty serious signal chat incident involving Waltz.
Right. Then there's Wong's background, his experience particularly with North Korea diplomacy.
And the speculation about who might replace them, names like Miller and Gorka, known for their strong alignment with the president.
Mm-hmm. And we absolutely have to remember those earlier firings, the half-dozen NSC staffers let go in April, reportedly over concerns about them being neocons or not loyal enough based on that Loomer info.
So when you put all that together, it paints quite a picture, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests potential shifts, maybe a consolidation of a particular approach within the national security apparatus.
Exactly. So for you listening, think about all these pieces, the high-level departures, the timing relative to the signal incident, Wong's specific experience perhaps being set aside, the kind of people being floated as replacements, and those earlier firings driven by loyalty concerns. What does this all suggest to you about the direction of the Trump administration's national security policy going forward? What are the really crucial questions we should all be asking right now as these changes take shape? That's something to chew on from this deep dive.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.